Now this chapter deals with risk and return. And one of the measures of risk that the authors want to introduce you to is the concept of the beta statistic. Now this is something commonly used in investments, but can be used in corporate finance or in anything else now. And a lot of financial theory, a lot of writings would tell you that the appropriate measure of risk for an asset that you're going to bring onto a balance sheet or into a portfolio is indeed the beta statistic. It's what's called, it's a risk measure for what's called systematic risk. And in this case, the systematic risk they're going to be talking about is the return of the market. Now, the logic behind systematic risk is that a systematic risk, these are things that impact all assets. So if you're talking about the stock market, for instance, market risk is viewed as the most common type of systematic risk. And so if the market goes way up, basically all stocks go up. And if the market goes way down, kind of falls off the cliff, all stocks go down. That's a market risk, that's a systematic risk. It impacts all assets. And so that's what they're talking about in this chapter. Now, in this particular problem now, they're going to show you what happens for various assets with different kinds of betas. And what happens when the market goes up 10% and the market goes down 10%. Now, the thing I want you to remember about beta, and we've talked about this in a previous video, is that a beta of 1 means that you're taking on 100% of the risk of the market. 1 is the decimal equivalent of 100%. So when you see these betas, always, in my mind, it always helps to think of them in their percentage format instead of the decimal. But nonetheless, a beta of 1 for an asset would mean that you're taking on 100% of the risk of the market. Now, as an investor, if I take on 100% of the risk of the market, then what I expect as a return is 100% of the market return. If I take on a stock with a beta of 0.8, 80%, then I'm taking on 80% of the risk of the market, and I expect to get 80% of the return of the market. So that's the basic logic of beta. It's fairly simple, but the more of the market risk you take on, the more of the market return that you want. And we'll talk more about beta in just a moment here. Now, this particular problem now reads as follows. It says, answer the question below for assets A to D, shown in the table. And in the table in your textbook now, they show you assets A through D, and they give you the beta for each of those assets. The A part says, what impact would a 10% increase in the market return have on each asset's return? The B part, what impact would a 10% decrease have on each asset's return? The C part says, if you believe the market were going to increase in the future, which asset would you choose? And the last part says, if you thought the market was going to go down in the future, which asset would you choose? And so that's the problem that they've asked us to work and that we're going to look at right now. Now, the A part of this problem now, this is assets A through D. These are the betas of the assets. Asset A is 0.5, B is 1.6, C is negative 0.2, and D is 0.90. Now, again, I think it's instructive as a student to think about beta in its percentage format. So in other words, asset A now, it only takes on 50% of the risk of the market, whereas asset B takes on 160% of the risk of the market. Lots more risk with B, you would expect lots more return. Asset C now, this has a negative beta. Now just so you know, negative betas don't really exist in the markets. If they come around, they're kind of transitory in nature. But again, they give you a negative beta here. And the D part, 0.9, that's indeed, you're taking on 90% of the risk of the market. By the way, stocks like A, C, and D, they have a beta less than 1. Those are the stocks, the assets that are referred to as a defensive stocks. Okay, what you're going to see in the B part here, that what you're trying to defend against is a downturn in the market. So you would go to defensive stocks if you thought the market was going to go down. Now, in the A part now, they're assuming that the market goes up 10%. Well, if the market goes up 10%, what return would you expect to receive from each of these assets? Mathematically, it's fairly simple. You multiply beta times the change in the market, and that tells you your expected return. So for asset A, 0.5 times 10%, you'd expect asset A to give you a 5% return. You're taking on less risk than the market. You should expect less return than the market return. Asset B, on the other hand, you're taking 160% of the risk of the market. What return do you expect? Well, take 1.6, multiply that by 10, you expect a 16% return. You're taking on more risk than the market, therefore you require more return than the market return. Specifically, you are expecting 160% of the market's return. If your broker gave you an asset that had a beta of 1.6, you held it for a year, and instead of getting 16%, you got 12%, you shouldn't be unhappy with that because you're getting less return for the risk you're taking on. So again, this is called beta management, and this is the way that you look at these things. A negative beta, negative 0.2 times 10%, that gives you negative 2. 0.9 times 10, positive 0.9. You're taking on 90% of the risk of the market. You should only expect what? 90% of the market's return for that asset. And again, this is indeed the beta statistic. And when you look at a rising market, the C part of this problem asked us, if you thought the market was going to go up, which asset would you want to buy? Well, you want to buy the asset that had the greatest beta. In this case, you want to buy asset B. If you thought the market was going to go up, you'd want to go in B because why? You get a big return. Okay? So again, if you expect the markets to go up, you want to buy, sell, trade so that the beta of the assets, the beta of your portfolio increases. So again, what asset B shows you is that you expect the market to go up, buy high betas. The other logic here is that how do you beat the market? Well, if the market's going up, the way you beat the market is to earn a return greater than the market return. Well, you want to buy, sell, trade assets into assets that have betas greater than 1 in order to do that. So if you finish the year with a 16% return and the market had gone up 10%, you would say, you know, I beat the market. Market went up. How do you beat the market? You earn more return than the market return. Now the B part of this problem looks at what do you do when you expect the market to go down. Now, just a moment ago I told you that the way you beat the market in an up market is to earn a greater return than the market return. How do you beat the market in a down market? You lose less is really what you try to do. And in these cases, again, same assets, same betas, but we have a negative return. We have a down market in the market. If you take asset A, you're only taking on 50% of the risk of the market. If the market went down 10%, your stock, your asset should only be expected to go down 5%. And again, in the big picture, you would have beaten the market because you lost less. Now, losing less doesn't feel that great in reality, but indeed, that's how you beat the market. Asset B, this aggressive stock that's got a beta of 1.6, well, what the market gives, the market also takes away. So if you're taking on 160% of the risk of the market, and the market goes down 10%, you should expect your asset to go down 160% of that, or you should expect to lose 16%. Asset C, this negative beta, and again, these usually aren't available for investment in reality. But if you had a negative beta, that's where you want to be in a downturn. The market will go down, but your return, you should expect what? A positive return. A negative times a negative is a positive. So negative 0.2 times negative 10, we would expect a return of a positive 2%. A more kind of defensive stock is one with a beta less than 1, something like assets A and D. Asset D, 0.9 beta, you take on 90% of the risk. If the market goes down 10%, you go down 9%. You lose less, you beat the market. What your author wants me to tell you here is that if you expect the market to go down, which one of these assets would you want to buy? Well, you'd want to buy C. It has a negative beta. You'd make money in a down market. Again, that's not usually an option that you have in investments, but that's what your author would like me to tell you about having a negative beta. But these are betas. They measure systematic risk. I think it's instructive to look at betas in their percentage formats as opposed to the decimal format. But everything is relative to the market, and beta is the way you measure what's called market risk or systematic